The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good morning. This is Ajay Singh. I'm Director of Successful Project India, calling from Minnesota, USA here. And with me is Kay Weiss and Frank Saladis also. And special good evening to India. We have a lot of people in India is also on this call. And welcome to this PMP Prep Webinar. And before Frank starts, I would like to spend a few minutes in introducing him. And in the end of the webinar, we will talk about some of the product offerings we are doing in India. And so Frank Saladis is a consultant, instructor, and leader within project management area. He's a PMP certified, awarded PMI Person of the Year in 2006. He is a graduate of PMI Leadership Institute class. He was the PMI New York City chapter president for 10 years. He was a senior instructor. He is still a senior instructor of International Institute of Learning and Successful Projects. He was the founder of International Project Management Day. He is the author of 7 published books on project management, past editor of all PM newsletter. He has worked in companies like AT&T Longlines, BCS and Corp, ITS Cisco System. He was also awarded PMI Fellow in 2013, very recent, and this is a very prestigious award. And he lives in New York, Long Island, and with his family. And with that, I would like to welcome Frank Saladis. Frank, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ajay. For those of you that are calling in from other places around the world, I'm in New York City. Kay Weiss is in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and Ajay is in Rochester, Minnesota. And we're all experiencing one thing that's the same, and that is that the temperatures are in the single digits. So wherever you are, if it's warm out there, that's great for you. We're struggling with snow here and ice cold temperatures, and we expect that to be that way for a long time. So anyway, we're all thawed out. We're ready to go for our session here. And this is about preparing the PMP exam. It's really not going to give you a lot of detailed information about what's on the test or anything like that. The goal here is really to help you plan a strategy to study, to make sure that you have the qualifications that are necessary in order to sit for the exam. And also, I have a few other comments to make about the whole credential process and things like that. It gets a lot of attention in many project management communities around the world, LinkedIn and so on. So it's important that we really understand what the PMP exam is about, and also make sure that you have the right information. Now, it's also important for you to take the time to go to the website, the PMI website, www.pmi.org, and when you click on certification, for those of you that are preparing for the PMP exam, that it really is necessary for you to download and read the PMP handbook. There's a lot of information in there, some of which I will cover during this webinar. But there's also a tremendous amount of other information that's going to be useful that you need to review. So very important to make sure that you get that particular document. Now, as far as the objectives of this session, okay, and by the way, as we go through this, I will check the chat boxes. I'm going to ask either Kay Weiss or Jay to check for questions, and I'll try to answer some of those questions as we go through it to try to keep this somewhat interactive. But the objectives of the session were to provide information that will assist you with your exam preparation and the completion of the exam application. Okay, so these are things that we will provide for you that will help you to make the application process itself a little bit easier. And that can be an ordeal, and it does take time. Those of you that have started the process know what I'm talking about, that it does require a fair amount of effort and several hours of your time in order to do it correctly. There are several steps in the application process, and we'll cover those. I will also offer you some suggestions on how to establish an effective study plan. And Also, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the PMBOK guide, and we're talking about the 5th edition of the PMBOK. Okay, and it's important for us as we prepare for the exam to understand that the PMBOK guide is exactly that. It is a guide, which means that it will provide you with high-level information about project management, and that many of the questions will be derived in some way from material that's in the PMBOK. But the PMBOK is only one source of your study, and I look at the PMBOK as a source to make sure that you understand the overall flow of project management, the 5 process groups, the 10 knowledge areas, but the detailed information, today I think they use the term deeper dive to this information, is going to come from textbooks and workbooks and videos that you might see, things like that that are going to add much more detail to the whole the exam content and the processes and things like that. So it's really important that we spend a little bit of time talking about that, the PMBOK. Okay, now I'm going to start off by making, it's more of an appeal to you, but I think you really need to understand this, that a certain commitment is required of you when it comes to the PMP exam and the credential. Okay, it requires your commitment. You have to really work at it. It's a personal study plan, and I'm emphasizing the verification of your education, and that is your formal education in project management and also your project management experience. And I will talk about that in a little bit more detail. But what I'm asking you to do as you prepare for the exam is to really, truly assess not only your knowledge of project management and how well you might be able to answer questions on an exam, but also your true experience, because people that see others with the PMP credential have a certain expectation of those people in terms of their performance and their experience. So I want to emphasize that, and I will continue to emphasize that throughout the session. The PMBOK, the PMP, as you see in this next bullet, this is right out of the website, the PMI website. Globally recognized and demanded, the PMP demonstrates that you have the experience, education, and competency to lead and direct projects. Now, I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about that. You do have to prove your experience. All right? You need to show, if you have a degree, a 4-year degree, that you have 4,500 hours of verifiable project management experience, that you have 35 hours of education, formal education in project management, and that you also are telling people through this that you have the competency to lead and direct projects. And that's a key word, competency. Okay, and I just want to emphasize that as you progress in your career, the PMP is one indication, only one indication of your overall experience as a project manager. What it does is it tells people that you have experience, that you can show that experience, that you've actually managed projects, that you've managed working with teams, that you understand not just the fundamental concepts of project management, but that you can actually lead a team to success. So competency is a key word, and I just want you to keep that in your mind, because when you apply for jobs, change jobs, seek new positions, that you will be expected to demonstrate that competency. So it's very important. Now, I added a little bit more here, personal integrity. Okay, the credential indicates that you have verifiable experience in leading and managed projects. You have demonstrated your knowledge of project management processes and tools and techniques, and what we call generally accepted project management best practices as described in the PMBOK guide, generally accepted project management practices. Now, you have to understand, and many of you are in different industries, that since the PMBOK is a guide to the project management body of knowledge, that it is not specific to any one industry, okay? These are what we call the things that project managers would typically do in most cases when managing a project, regardless of size of the project, from small projects that are only a few days in length to projects that are many years in length and in multi-billions of dollars. Okay, so we have to take a look at this high-level general view And you have to condition yourself as you're taking the exam and preparing for the exam that it is not designed, and neither is the PMBOK, designed to conform exactly with what your particular organization does. It is general information about what most project managers would do most of the time on most projects. That's very important. Okay? And the other thing was, it says here that you have attended formal project management training and education programs, which means that you have taken the time to learn about project management by taking formal classes from training organizations, universities, colleges, and things like that. So it's very important that all of that is truthfully explained and added to your application. Now, the value of the PMP credential. This will vary depending on who you are and also other people's perception, but this is the way I see it, okay? If you have the PMP credential, it is an indication of both knowledge and experience, that you understand project management, that you have experience managing projects, that you are capable of solving issues associated with the projects, guiding a team, understanding the principles, the success factors, key performance indicators, and so on. Okay, knowledge and experience. Another thing is it's an indication of your desire to continue your professional development. The PMP credential tells other people that you have actually spent the time, you did training, you did studying, you took an exam, you got a credential. It's a signal, it's basically an indication that you desire to continue with your professional development. Maybe you're going to seek other certifications like the program management certification or risk or something like that. Okay, and the last one here is an indication that you understand what is expected of a professional project manager. Okay, when people see PMP, when you are applying for a position, when you are working in a project, and people see that credential, there's a certain expectation there that you really know what you can do, that you're capable of performing, that you understand what's at stake, that you have the ability to deal with the stakeholders at multiple levels, from executives down to team members. So all of these things, this is my impression of the PMP credential, and it's something that when you get it, you would want to continue to demonstrate, so that you personally are going to continue the value, to have people see the value of the credential. So you are taking on a little bit of a responsibility when you get the PMP credential. Now, general knowledge about project management and professional development. Okay, it's one part. The PMP is one part of your continued professional development, which means that once you do get this credential, that you're going to continue on and continue to learn. And once you achieve the credential, you will be required, in order to maintain the credential, to take educational courses, training courses, and in different ways make a contribution to the project management discipline as you perform your work. And that means not only just attending classes, but becoming part of a professional organization, maybe involved in community projects, doing volunteer work, things like that. But you're going to continue your personal and professional development. The principles and knowledge associated with the PMP credential really, and I want to clarify this to make sure we understand. It says can be applied to most industries, but each industry requires additional training experience. Now, what I mean by that is, if you happen to be a project manager that is involved in the development of software, that's one set of knowledge and training and experience and so on. If you're a project manager who's involved in the construction of high-rise buildings and bridges and mega projects, that's a completely different set of knowledge and experience and training and technical expertise. Okay, if you happen to be in aerospace or anything like that, the important thing here is that besides the general knowledge of project management, you now have to understand how things work in that particular discipline. So what we mean by general knowledge of project management would be things like defining the project scope. understanding how complex the project is, how many piece parts there are in the project, what the deliverables are, and the work required to produce all those deliverables. Developing estimates, and these estimates include your human resource estimates, your materials, your equipment, all of these different things, but not just the estimate on cost, but the estimate on time. Plus, if you think about developing estimates, estimates involve assessing risk. Okay, so you'll see I have assessing project risk. You would be involved in negotiating contractual agreements and also abiding by contractual agreements and understanding contracts. That you have to plan for quality and get your team members to understand the level of quality that you're going to produce, and also understand things like how much quality should be going into the work that's being done, because the more quality and the more time you spend improving something, the greater the cost would be. So there's always these balances of quality, cost, scope, and things like that. Communicating to resources, to stakeholders. You have multiple stakeholders. By definition, a stakeholder is any person or organization that is directly involved in or in some way impacted either positively or negatively as a result of the project. Okay, so that means that you have to have the ability to balance the needs of stakeholders that are coming from many different organizations and have different levels of interest in the project. And of course, you need to assess project performance. We'll briefly talk about earned value and things like that. But you know, how are you doing budget-wise? How are you doing schedule-wise? How are the team members performing together? What's the quality like? Are you managing things like scope creep, you know, things like that? So this is what we mean by the general knowledge of project management, and all of it is important not only in your performance on a project, but you continue to learn about these things through your professional development programs. Now, when I mentioned specific knowledge of project management and technology, you have to consider this. You know, someone working in an IT or telecom type environment will probably experience different issues, different terminology, and different technology than someone that's in construction or in energy or software or automotive, aerospace, transportation. All of these are just examples of that. You know, the general project management, as explained in the PMBOK guide, gives you this, you know, kind of overview of what needs to be done. But then you personally have to drill this down to the appropriate level of detail to be credible in your particular field. So I want to dispel this rumor that you might hear out that if you become a PMP, then you are capable of managing any project in any discipline. And I think that you would get an awful lot of people who will disagree with you. And the PMP does not say that. It means that you understand how to manage a project professionally, that you understand project management and can apply the principles in a logical way, and I emphasize in a common sense way, in order to achieve successful results. And speaking of common sense, someone told me long ago, and I truly believe this, that project management is nothing more than organized common sense. And if you think about that, really, it does make sense that before you begin a project, you understand what is the project about. You know, what are we attempting to do? Why would we do it? Who would be involved in it? Once you understand the project, you need to gather up information. You have to determine what the detailed scope of work is. From there, you develop your plans in more detail, including developing a schedule, getting your resources, figuring out the cost, determining the risks, what the level of quality. Then after you do all that, you execute the plan, understanding that a plan that has been prepared is going to change almost immediately upon execution. So we have to have a change control process. We have to manage performance and things like that, and you know, make changes and occasionally correct problems and deviations from your plan, and then eventually close it out. And if you think about it that way, it's highly logical, okay, and makes perfect sense to do it that way. So keep that in mind, that project management is nothing more than organized common sense. Now, the project manager's roles, okay, and those of you that are planning to take the exam need to be aware of the fact that a project manager, at least from from our perspective here, from the PMP exam perspective, is not necessarily a person who is going to be the technical lead and technical expert and get down into the nuts and bolts of a project. We kind of look at the project manager as the integrator and coordinator. The fourth chapter in the PIM box starts off with integration management. It is your job as the project manager to take all the piece parts, all the deliverables, and all of the people and pull them together into producing the final deliverable. Okay, and that means lots and lots of coordination, lots of communication, working with people. That you are put in a leadership position, that you are the leader of this team, that you have to make sure that people are motivated, that people understand the direction, that you provide clear information, especially about the objectives of the project and so on. You're a facilitator. That means that you are going to be conducting multiple meetings. You're going to be assessing the status of the project. You're going to be solving problems. You're going to give presentations, and you're going to have to deal with the conflict that generally comes with when people are working on a project. And I don't mean conflict in a negative way. I mean conflict when people are going to disagree on how to do things, that issues are going to come up that require a strong leader that has good facilitation skills. Your job, I've asked this question in classrooms before, what is the role of the project manager? And occasionally I get someone saying it's to control the project team. And that is really not the role of the project manager. Your job is not to control the team. I like to say that your job is to ensure that the team members are in control of their assigned work, which means that you're a support person. You're going to provide some direction. You're going to be, I like to use the term run interference for them. You're going to find out if there are obstacles that are preventing them from getting their work done. But you're not going to do their work. Your job is really to help them along, and you want to rely on them to provide the technical work that has to be done. The project manager should be, I call it, technically credible, and that is to be able to speak intelligently to the people who are working on the projects, the team members and so on, the engineers, the technicians, the testers and so on, but that you are not necessarily the technical expert. So you have to speak the language, you need to understand how the technology works, but you leave the technical work to the people who are actually there to do that. So that's my take on the project manager's roles. Now, before I get into the actual application, I'm just going to check and see, Kay, are there any questions that have been put up on the chat that I might be able to address before I move forward?
We have had very few questions so far. It looks like we do have a question about access to the PowerPoint, and I will have to say that's about it for right now.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, as far as the PowerPoint goes, and there is a lot of information on here, this particular session is being recorded, and we will make this available so that those of you that are here that want to go back over and review it, we'll make that available for you. The Project Management Professional Handbook, you can download at that link that's up on the slide, but you just simply go to pmi.org, click on certification, click on the Project Management Professional Handbook, and then download it and read it. I would recommend that you save it or you print it out, because you are going to have to refer to it multiple times. I'm making a point here, review the entire document. There is a tremendous amount of information in there, and I reviewed it again last night just to make sure that I was completely up to date on everything. So the information I'm providing to you is very fresh, but you still need to review the document. A lot of information that we can't cover in this session. And I'm going to, again, emphasize, ensure that you are qualified, that you possess the knowledge, that you have the experience, that you have the skills and the competency that are associated with the PMP credential. This is extremely, extremely important, okay? It's your personal integrity that's part of this, because many of the things that you do when you're filling out the application and preparing for the exam are associated with you telling people about what you do, what you're qualified at. So make sure that you can actually, you're prepared to prove your experience and your competency. Very, very key. And of course, it says here specific experience in leading and managing projects. Okay, and then the definition of that, or the explanation of that, is kind of vague, and I think it will differ depending on who you speak to. But leading and managing projects, if you are put, it could be a very large project, and you might be leading a portion of that project or a sub-project, or you might be part of a program and leading a project as part of a program. Make sure you're assessing what you're doing as the leader. Are you providing direction? Are you coaching? Are you mentoring? Are you assessing performance? Are you analyzing and reporting information? Are you making changes? Are you using your judgment to change direction? This is what we mean by leading. The managing side is making sure people are following process, that you're doing quality assurance and things like that. And that if a deviation occurs, or there's a significant variance, you're going to manage to make sure that the right steps are taken to correct that variance, that you're going to follow the change control process. So we want to separate leading and managing, but we also want to make sure that we understand that any project manager is doing both in any project. Now, the application steps here, there are multiple steps here. Number one, again, you heard me say this before, verify your eligibility. Read the document, verify eligibility, and we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. But your eligibility basically is that you are qualified, that you have the appropriate level of experience in terms of hours of actual project management experience plus your formal education. Then you have to complete your application. And the application itself is not something that will take 5 or 10 minutes to do. You have to actually take the time, and it will require some effort on your part. The first part, completing the contact information, name and address and all that, that's fairly easy. But when you get into the experience verification forms, this will take some time, and you want to make sure that you're very, very honest and upfront about what you've placed on those documents. Now, what it says here is inform your selected project context. The important part of this is that when you are filling out your application and you have to complete these project management, project experience forms, experience verification forms, that it is possible, okay, that you would be audited by PMI. And you cannot know if you're going to be audited until you get through most of the application process. But if you do get audited, you will be required to go to these contacts who will have to sign documents that will support what you have said regarding your experience. So before you submit information, you want to make sure that you have your selected projects that you can easily obtain verification about through other people, and talk to those people and tell them, hey, I'm filling out my application, I'm planning to take the exam. If I am audited, I will be calling upon you to support my application. Okay, so make sure you do have good contacts that you can work with. Then you submit your application. Your application will be reviewed by PMI. Now, it says on the website it could take up to 5 days to do that. It really depends on the volume of applications and things like that, but let's say it'll take 5 days. If you get acceptance from PMI, your next step would be, well, they'll send you a note via email, and you will have to submit payment. And the submit payment can be done by a credit card. Now, upon submission of your payment, if at that particular point in time, that two things will occur. One is that they will say, thank you very much, your application has been processed, you can now schedule the exam, or you will be told that you have been randomly selected for an audit. And if that's the case, then there's another process that you have to follow. And the audit process, they allow you, according to the website, 90 days to complete the process. Once you get through all of that, you then schedule your exam, and you have 1 year in which to schedule the exam, and you will have to locate a Prometric test center, an authorized PMP exam test center in your area that has space for you to schedule. So that's up to you to schedule, and you can select at any time. And they do have exams running from Mondays through Saturdays, and mornings, afternoons, and evenings. So you have multiple opportunities to schedule. And the other thing here is the candidates that don't pass the exam can actually retake the exam 3 times. But I want to caution you on this, that each time you take the exam, it will cost you money. So my recommendation is do not take the exam until you feel that you are absolutely ready. And that readiness involves practice exams and a lot of personal study so that you're conditioned to take the exam. That means that you're comfortable with sitting there in an environment, in a test-taking environment. You're going to be answering multiple questions, and that you're ready for it, which means you've studied, you understand the concepts of the PMBOK and other material that have helped you prepare for the exam, plus you're going to be calling upon your personal experience as a project manager in order to complete the exam successfully. Now, we've talked about this before, and I just want to go over it again. Eligibility, that you have to look back. You can look back as far as 8 years in terms of experience, okay? And you want to make sure that you can verify all of that information. I've worked on these projects over the last 8 years, and in those 8 years, you need to show that you have 4,500 hours of experience. You also need to have proof of 35 hours of formal project management education. When we say formal project management education, we mean that you have taken a class on not just project management fundamentals, you know, what's the work breakdown structure, how do you schedule, forward pass, backward pass, quality management, risk management, things like that. This education, this proof of education can be in connection with leadership classes that help show you how to lead a team in a project, communication classes and things like that. So all of these things are combined together, and we need to have you need to show that 35 hours of actual formal education. And besides that, and this is in project management, you have, if you have a degree, that you would have to have proof of your degree by showing your diploma, your certificate, your transcripts, things like that. So this is all part of the eligibility in terms of your education. Now, here are some things that I think that you should be aware of. According to the PMI website, you have to show that you have been responsible for all aspects of the project for the life of the project, and that's specifically stated in the application, in the form, in the handout, the handbook. Responsible for all aspects of the project for the life of the project. That means, you know, getting the project started. You know, this is after you've been chartered and assigned to the project, getting your team together, negotiating for resources, making sure that you've reviewed the contract, you understand the risks. All the different elements of managing the project, all the tools and techniques, the managing scope, communicating plans, having presentations, producing reports, performance reports, and things like that. Lead and direct cross-functional teams. In most projects today, we work in what we call a matrix type of a structure. You will be required to manage resources that are coming from multiple functional teams, the technical experts that have come together to work on the project. So you have to exercise your ability to integrate all these different teams and direct them to make sure that the appropriate work is being done at the appropriate time. Demonstrate sufficient It is important that you really take a look and read through and understand what they mean when they say verify your eligibility. Now, other things. As far as eligibility goes, secondary degree, high school diploma, or an associate's degree, that requires 60 months of non-overlapping experience or 7,500 hours leading and directing projects. So if you don't have a 4-year degree, then you are going to have to provide a lot more detail about your experience as a project manager to fulfill the requirement of 7,500 hours leading and directing projects. If you have a 4-year degree, bachelor's degree or equivalent, you need 36 months of non-overlapping experience and 4,500 hours leading and directing. Now I have a few slides that will explain how to figure out these hours and what non-overlapping means. So I'll explain that in a little bit more detail when we get to those slides. Okay. Make sure that you go to the website and you complete your application. Like I said, www.pmi.org. You go there, click on certifications, click on PMP, and then the application is online. And I recommend that you actually print out the application and handwrite it so until you get it right. And then when you have everything done correctly and you feel that you're good, then you will take all that information and just provide that on the online application and submit your application online. Okay? There are multiple downloadable documents that you need to review, especially the PMP Credential Handbook and all the application forms. Now, one thing that I think that you really want to make sure you're aware of is also on the website is the Code of Professional Ethics, the PMI Code of Professional Ethics. Absolutely, positively take the time to not only download it, but read it and use it as part of your study. When you're taking the exam, that many of the questions will have embedded within them some elements of dealing with ethics and code of conduct violations and things like that. Things like conflict of interest would be something that you see commonly in a lot of practice questions. So it's personal integrity, it's professionalism, it's making sure that you're honest at all times, that you are going to be aware of all of the different elements of the code of ethics, including when people are doing things that are inappropriate that should be reported, that you are going to make sure that you manage your projects in a very, very honest way, that you're going to treat your customers with integrity and respect, things like that. So it's very important for you to read and study the code of ethics. Okay, so you get all your documents together and you go through the application. As I said before, handwrite it. Don't just do it all online, although you can save your work online. I think it's actually easier if you actually print out the forms and fill them out by hand, and if you need to make corrections, then no problem. And that I think will actually make your process, your application process a lot easier. So get all of your information together, get all of your required documents, your transcripts, your diplomas, your proof of education, all those different things, your project documentation, all that, have that ready so that you can kind of streamline the entire approach. Like I said before, it will definitely take some effort on your part. As I mentioned before, pre-establish or make sure that you have good project contacts for the projects that you are going to be putting on your experience verification form. I know that some of you will probably have situations where you have moved from one company to another, or maybe a project was a few years back and it might be difficult to find the contacts to support you. That's why it's important, if you can, to select projects that you can easily have access to the contacts. Okay, so that's an important thing for you to consider. And if you are having some difficulty in getting that verification, then my recommendation for you is to contact PMI's customer care and ask them the questions about, well, I'm trying to reach people to verify my project experience. I'm having difficulty. Are there any other alternatives or options? But make sure you ask that question of the folks at PMI. It says make sure you use the same name as what you will be on your ID. If you do not, if you go in there, if you use a nickname like Charlie or something like that, and your name is Charles, and you put Charlie in your application, but Charles is on your ID, you may not be allowed in. So let's make sure that all of your material, everything is consistent. Your appropriate name and the ID, everything has to match. And on the bottom of the page, and you can check on the internet, I'm sure that you can find this by Googling, but a spreadsheet to recreate your project management experience. And I'm going to show you a very simple spreadsheet that will help you to do that. But what we mean by a spreadsheet is, you list all your projects that you've done. You also will have to figure out how much initiating time, planning time, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing time goes for each project, and that's what's going to go on your experience verification form. So you want to have a method in which you are going to be able to track all of that experience that you have to reach the desired levels for your type of qualification, whether you have a high school diploma or a college degree. You have a lot of personal information that you're going to apply to the exam. Make sure that you put your name in as the way it would be on your certificate. You're going to get a nice printed certificate suitable for framing. You want to have your name spelled correctly, exactly the way you want it. Make sure that you have shown and can prove all of your attained education. And also, besides your formal education in terms of college and so on, you do need to prove your project management education, the courses that you took, the institution or organization that provided the training, and when it was, and the total number of hours. And then, of course, your project management experience, which would be your experience verification forms. Okay. Now, we talked about non-overlapping months, and this chart here really does a pretty good job of explaining what that means. So you can't double dip. 9 months is 9 months. If you worked on 10 projects in the 9 months, it's still only 9 months. Okay. So you'll notice that this chart shows that it's a total experience of 9 months here. Project 1 and Project 2 overlap. Okay. And then Project 3 is standalone. But if you add up the hours of Project 1, 2, and 3, even though Project 1 and 2 overlap, you will see that that's only 9 months. Now, here's another important thing to remember, and that is that right now PMI is looking at your experience based on a 40-hour work week. Okay, Monday through Friday, 40-hour work week. So you have to kind of make some adjustments in your projects when you're filling out your application to understand this 40-hour work week. Okay, so it will require maybe a little bit of adjustment on your part, but they use a 40-hour work week, but nothing can be overlapping in terms of totals. So you can't double dip. Right? So this is an important item. Remember when you're calculating your hours. Now, the experience, and this is where I want to get into a little bit about what you have to provide on the experience verification form about your background in project management. So you have the name of the project and start and end dates, what your project role was. Now, again, the opinions will vary on this, but in many projects, you may not have the actual title of project manager, yet your role in the project, you might be managing a sub-project or managing a large team that's doing a portion of it. You want to make sure that you clearly define what that role is and whether or not it involves leading and managing. So be very clear about what your role and job title is. The primary industry that you're in, like telecom, software development, construction, something like that. And of course, all of your contact information, email and phone number and so on. The project contact is important. That's why I said before, make sure that you do have your contacts lined up and that they are aware that they may be asked to validate your experience in an audit. Okay? As far as the project details, now you are not given a lot of leeway here in terms of providing information. You have to show that you worked in these 5 domains of project management. You notice that they're also the process groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. How many hours of each? Now, according to the website, it says that you will be able to describe these in 300 to 500 characters. Now, I looked at the experience verification form online, and it looks like you will be able to explain what you did as far as initiating, what you did as far as planning, executing, and so on in certain blocks, but your descriptions cannot exceed 500 characters, okay, which means, according to them, 80 to 100 words. Okay, that's on the website, so you're going to have to kind of make sure that you condense your information and be very descriptive about it and not use complete sentences and things like that, and I'll show you basically what that means. Now, here are some examples of what you could put on the experience verification form. For instance, under initiating process, you'll notice that these are not complete sentences and they don't describe things in a lot of detail. PMI is interested in what you did as a project manager on the project. They're not interested in the details of the project itself, but only that you can actually verify that you did these kinds of things. So you'll see, initiating process, manage the business case development, perform cost-benefit analysis, defined initial project scope, determined initial financial requirements, identified project stakeholders, conducted feasibility study. These are things that are associated with initiating. For planning, you define the total project scope, manage the detailed requirements gathering process, manage WBS development. Now, I'm making sure that you understand that we're not talking about complete sentences here. We're talking about description of things that you did as a project manager working on the project. Executing process, coordinated quality assurance reviews. You didn't actually conduct the quality assurance review, but you may have coordinated it and made sure that it occurred, that you spent lots of time negotiating for resources after the plan had been developed, that you're assessing team performance, you're organizing team building activities. I put that in there for a reason. You as a project manager are a team leader, and that means that there'll be times when the going might get a little tough, and you as a project manager, people will be looking to you to keep things moving, that sometimes there will be some setbacks, to make sure that you work with the team, you get the team to work together, that you want them to become a high-performing team, and that you should also be celebrating success, okay? And also, you're going to be conducting performance appraisals of people on your project. And the monitoring and controlling, again, you're administering the change control process. You're making sure that people follow it. You have explained it to people. You're assessing change requests. You may be part of the change control board, that you're reviewing project performance and you're looking for variances, and that you're taking the appropriate steps to manage and correct unacceptable variance. You're using something like earned value analysis as part of your monitoring control processes. This is the kind of thing that would be expected to be seen on the experience verification form. And again, emphasize, don't fill out full sentences and tell stories. They want to know what you did, okay? And the PMBOK guide will be very helpful in providing you with the kind of information that's needed in order to complete that application correctly. But again, it's all about verifying that you can prove that you did all of these things, okay? Now, I mentioned a matrix, and this is something I want you to think about doing because it's going to be helpful, and that is that if you take a look at a project, and I just put phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this table to represent the various phases of a project. Your phases could be the concept phase, the design phase, build phase, test phase, and deploy phase, okay? But each phase includes the 5 processes. The 5 process groups are not phases. And you'll see that there's an acronym that appears in each phase. It says IPECC, I-P-E-C-C, which means initiate, planning, executing, the C for controlling, and then C for closing, okay? And if you think about a project that you work on, okay, if you think about the project and think about phase 1 and 2 and so on, ask yourself, well, how many hours was I involved in initiating type of work in phase 1 and in phase 2 and so on? And then if you add them up across the page, across the table, you will get X number of hours in initiating. So let's say that your initiating time is 50 hours. And then you go into planning. Every phase is planned. There will always be planning. Planning is an ongoing thing. So maybe in the total course of the project, you spent maybe 200 hours of planning type work. Okay, so if you had 100 hours, had 50 hours of initiating and 200 hours of planning, okay, that means you have a total of 250 hours of experience in this project so far. Then you look at executing. Look at what the definition of executing processes is. What did you do? You had to negotiate for team members. You were going out there obtaining suppliers and things like that. How many hours of executing was spent in each phase? The same thing with monitoring and controlling, and the same thing with closing. When you put that all together and you add up all these hours by phase, you're going to have a total number of hours for the project, and that would go on your experience verification form, and you should be able to validate that by having someone sign off if you were audited. So let's say this particular project might have given you 500 hours of project experience. Then you go to the next project and you do the same exact thing, and maybe that particular project over time had 1,000 hours, and that means you have a total of 1,500 hours. And then you do another project and then another one until you have achieved the 4,500 hours or the 7,500 hours that is required, depending on your education level and you know, whether or not you have a degree. Okay? The 5 process groups will be found in every phase of every project, and this format is very easy to use in helping you to determine the number of hours that you have experienced in the projects. Okay? Now, again, before I move forward, I provided an awful lot of information. Kay, are there any questions that have come up so far?
As a matter of fact, Frank, there are many questions, and if you'd like to address them, I'll read you a few of them, and you can continue on, or we can, you know, go through all of them, whatever you'd like. Shall I just?
Okay, let's go for at least the first 3.
All right. So one of them is that the reference people for the audit purposes in the application process, is there any specific designation level requirements?
The reference designation requirements, I'm not really
so
sure.
Frank, I think what they're asking is, do the contacts for the references need to be their managers, or do they have to have a certain level in the organization in order to be listed as a contact?
No, I don't believe so. Okay, I think that I read the application information online, and they did mention things like managers, supervisors, people like that, but they were not necessarily specific of a particular level. So my recommendation would be to get people who have some authority. That maybe it's a supervisor, maybe it's a peer, maybe it's your manager, maybe it's an executive sponsor, someone like that to be involved in the audit, but they're not exactly 100% clear on that. But my recommendation would be to find someone who had some level of authority.
Thank you, Frank. And Lynn asks, what if you are in a current project that has not ended at the time of the submission? Can you use a current project without an end date?
Yes, you can. So some projects go on for years. You know, some people will actually send in an application for one project that has, you know, a 5-year life cycle, and they may have completed 4 years of the 5-year life cycle of the project and have gained a tremendous amount of experience. So that's actually kind of an advantage to you in that because you're actively involved in the project, the contact people would be easily reached. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a completed project. You would definitely want to show how you have completed phases of that project, though. That would be, there should be no problem with that at all.
Very good. Thank you for that, Frank. And I have one of my new acquaintances asked a question that says, I was the project lead of a project but was unable to see the project close due to me changing jobs. Can I list that project for PM experience on the application?
Yes. See, this is the thing about your experience. It doesn't mean that you managed an entire project from start to end, but you did manage a project from start to end for your particular responsibility. Like many people tell me, you know, the type of work that I do, I'm involved in the design, build, and test phase, and then I move on to another project. So I actually never see the project close. But you did see the project phase close. You saw your deliverables to closure. So it's pretty important that you make sure that you understand that, people change, their jobs change and things like that. But you have to kind of look at your experience. I was in this particular phase. The phase lasted a year. During that time, I did initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing work, and I closed my phase and I produced my deliverables. That's what you have to explain.
Thank you, Frank. We have a person who's asked if you can comment on something that a friend told them. First, they're basically asking, what should I be studying from? The friend told them that in order to pass the exam, that they really need to be able to kind of regurgitate the PMBOK.
Okay, I could say a lot about that. Number one, I would say that anybody that tells you that you need to memorize the PMBOK is doing you a disservice. I know that some people, the only way they study is through memorization, but the PMP exam is not about memorizing the PMBOK guide. That would probably be fairly impossible to do anyway. It is not even a regurgitation of the PMBOK. It is the PMBOK, and this is my understanding based on doing this for years and years and years, is that I like to say that the PMBOK is about 60% of the exam. In that, you do need to understand the 5 processes. You really do need to understand how the 10 knowledge areas are integrated to come together, okay? But it is not about memorizing the PMBOK and then answering questions that are more definitional in content and structure, okay? So here's my suggestion. So it's a long-winded answer. Number one is there's no escape from it. You have to read the PMBOK. You do. You have to read it, okay? And more than likely, you're going to read it more than once. And some people have read it 2 or 3 times before they can really grasp it. Now, this is going to sound a little strange, but the PMBOK, the way I see it, was written by people who believe that anyone who reads it will already know what's in it. I know that sounds strange, but it is written by people that are practicing project managers, and since it's called the Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge, there's an assumption in here that people who actually read the PMBOK are simply using it as a tool that they would apply and refer to during the actual implementation of the project. So it's not a textbook, okay? So to kind of answer the question maybe in a better way, yes, you definitely have to read the PMBOK. I don't recommend memorizing the PMBOK, but you do have to make sure you understand how to apply the various concepts, the various tools, techniques, what the processes mean. And one way to do that, a way to help you do that, those of you that happen to have your PMBOK handy and are listening to this session might want to go to this. Let me see if I can find it now. On page 61 in the 5th edition PMBOK is a kind of a matrix or a table that is associated with the 10 knowledge areas and the 5 process groups. Okay, now there are a total of 47 sub-processes here that support the 5 process groups. And you'll notice that if you look at page 61, you will see how project integration management crosses the 5 processes, that scope management is heavily associated with planning process group and monitoring and controlling process group. So here's my suggestion. Rather than try to commit the PMBOK to memory, you would have to do something like this. If you take a look at project scope management, and it says 5.3, define scope. Okay, what you should be able to do without looking at the PMBOK after you've done your study is, what does define scope mean? Define scope means that you are going to understand and develop basically a project scope statement that defines who will work on the project, why the project is being done, when it will be done, why it will be done, how, and where, and so on. Okay? And if you can understand the general procedures associated with defining a scope to get a scope statement, then you're good. And then, in other words, it's 5.4, create work breakdown structure. Okay? You should understand, well, in order for me to create a work breakdown structure, I have to follow a process known as decomposition. I'm going to take a project that may be very complex, and I'm going to break it down into smaller, more manageable pieces, because the work breakdown structure is referred to as the cornerstone of planning. When I have broken the project down to its lowest level elements, called work packages, I have the ability to define the resource requirements, to develop an estimate for each of the work packages, the activities in the work packages, and also I can define the budgets and so on. So that's what when we talk about this regurgitation of the PMBOK, it really begins by looking at page 61 and making sure that you can, in your own words, describe what each one of these particular items are. For instance, estimate activity resources, estimate activity durations, that we should say, oh yeah, okay, estimate activity durations. I can use analogous estimating, parametric estimating, or bottom-up estimating. Which one would be the best one to use in this case? So I know that's a kind of a long answer, but read the PMBOK maybe 2-3 times. First time through will be the most difficult time, but once you start to study, it'll all start to make sense. And then basically try to apply and understand what these terms mean the way you might be working on a project. And I think if you do that, then the PMBOK will certainly be a very useful tool and will be very helpful.
Thank you, Frank. There are a few other questions, but if you'd like to finish your slides, maybe I could save them for the end.
Okay, all right, so let me go on a few more, and then we'll take a few more questions before we wrap up. Contacts, we talked about. Make sure that you get people who are associated with the project to be your contacts, and that they're going to be easy to reach if you need them. Make sure that they are not surprised by the audits. That's what this no surprises means. And make sure that they understand the projects that you worked on as you had put them in your application, so that they fully understand what will happen and what they'll need to validate should you be audited. So that's very important. Okay. Then you submit your application, and this becomes the waiting game. And like I said, it could take up to 5 days to do this. I don't think depending on the time of year, it may not take that long, but let's say it takes 5 days. Okay. You will get a receipt from PMI. You'll get a notice from PMI saying that you've been accepted. At that particular point in time, you have to pay the fee, $405. And I checked this online, and it's still $405 for PMI members and $555 for non-members. Okay, you get the code. The payment is made. You get this code. You can then schedule the exam. You have 1 year in which to schedule the exam. If you don't do it in that year's time frame, you're going to have to reinitiate the process. So a year is a long time. My personal recommendation, don't wait a year. Study, study, study. But I would say that when you have done your study, and don't wait, maybe 3 months would be the maximum time I would wait to schedule. But during your study, I would suggest that you set a date. This is my target date for me taking the exam. And that date in itself, I think, will drive you towards completion. Okay, so it's very important you do that. Now, unfortunately, some of you will get audited. Okay, it will be a random selection. It's nothing personal. They're going to audit people. They have to. It's a requirement to do the audit for the credentialing purposes and so on, and to maintain that credential through ANSI and so on. So if you do get the audit, you're going to have to follow. By the way, you won't know you're getting audited until after you send in your money, and then you might be randomly selected. Now you'll be directed to obtain all the audit forms and so on, and all the instructions that are required in order for you to complete the audit. And you have 90 days to complete the audit. I would not recommend that you take the 90 days. Get it done as quickly as possible. Okay, you'll be provided with a lot of information about the audit. Get all your information together. Gather up your information from your various contacts. Get them to sign the documents that they're required to sign. You package up everything, put them in sealed envelopes, and you send them back to PMI, and PMI will do the assessment. So I'm going to suggest that most of you will probably not be audited. I think they're auditing like 15 to 20% of the applicants. But be prepared for it. Don't be surprised, but be ready for it, okay? Make sure you have all of your information together and follow the instructions that they provide you, and you should have no problem in getting through this, okay? It will take some time for them to receive and process it, but you will receive the results of the audit roughly about a week after they get the information. Now, this has to be mailed. This is not something you can do online. They want the actual documents mailed to them. They will receive them. They will review them, and then you will get the notification upon completion of the audit. Hopefully, you've done everything you were supposed to do. And again, remember, personal integrity is key here. And then you should get this through this audit with no problem. Okay. Once you get through that, you're approved. You go to a Prometric Test Center. You're eligible. You set the target date for when you want to take the exam. Schedule it. You have 1 year. And I want to just point out that when you go to take your exam, you have to have 2 forms of ID, including a valid government-issued ID with your photo on it. And you need to make sure that the names on the documents for the application, everything is exactly the way it is on your ID, okay? When you go to the Prometric Test Center, they're going to ask you to empty your pockets. You cannot bring anything into the exam area, no cell phones, no electronic devices. You cannot even bring your own pencils in or pens. They will provide you with your writing instruments. They'll provide you with scratch paper. Any scratch paper that you use, you cannot take home with you. You must turn it in. They'll count the paper. You want to make sure that there is no chance that any of the material for the exam is going to be in any way compromised and somehow captured and sent to other people. So they're very, very strict about that. There is no scheduled break during this exam. This is a 4-hour exam, running clock. If you get thirsty, if you get hungry, you need to get a snack, all of that time will be burned away while you're away from the desk. It's a very controlled environment. They ask you to lock everything up, and so be prepared for that when you go, okay? And make sure that you get a good night's rest before the exam. Don't go out and party the night before the exam or anything like that. You need your full concentration, your energy. At the completion of the exam, you will be somewhat tired, okay? You got everything taken care of. You're on your way to being certified. And basically, that's really kind of the entire process. Okay, if you pass the exam, in order to pass the exam, this is how they do the grading now. It's a pass-fail approach. It is not a grade anymore. It used to be a grade. Years ago, it was 68.5%. Then it was 62%, and so on. Right now, the assessment will be made based on proficiency. Proficient means above average knowledge in the domain or process group. Moderately proficient means your average knowledge and below proficient. Okay, and they are going to be assessing your proficiency in the 5 process groups, which means that's kind of part of your study. If you get back to page 61 in the PMBOK, okay, initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, closing, and the 10 knowledge areas. Now, I wanted to point out, if you have to take the exam again, you didn't pass it, you can take it up to 3 times, but if you're a PMI member, it'll cost you $275 to take the exam again, and if you're not a PMI member, $375. It is very important that you don't take the exam until you're ready. Study, study, study. Form study groups. Go online. Look for practice questions. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but make sure you are ready to take the exam. If you do pass, which if you did your study and you were diligent about it, you're going to feel like, for that moment, like $1 million. It'll feel just great, and you'll say, wow, I finally got it. You add it to your resume, and you move forward. Remember, again, the PMP is only one part of your professional development. It's telling people, I've studied, I've learned, I have experience, things like that. But you're going to be in a constant learning process. You get put on what is known as a professional development program after you pass the PMP exam, and you need to continue your learning. Okay, but I can tell you, you will, trust me, you will jump for joy when you pass that exam. No question about it. Am I right, Kay?
Absolutely jumping for joy, everybody who passes their exam.
Absolutely right. Okay, now this part here, and I know we're pretty much going to run out of time, so I don't have a lot more time here. Let me just do a few quick things here, and I'm going to take some questions and we'll wrap up. But anyway, it is we call it a knowledge-based exam. Apply your knowledge and experience to situations and scenarios. That's where your experience comes in. You need to be an experienced project manager, and you have to rely heavily on, well, here's the situation, what would I do? Now, when it comes to the answers, it's also important that many of the answers are going to look good. You say, well, that looks like a good answer, or that one, which one is the best answer? So the exam itself can be very, very difficult in that, you really, really need to understand the question. What are they asking you to do? What is the situation? And what is the best way to approach it? That's really important. Okay, so of the 4 answers, 3 of them might be sort of correct, but only 1 of them will be truly correct. And that is part of the challenges, and that's why study is so important and experience is so important. 200 questions, mostly scenario. I would doubt that there would be very many definition questions. One of the things that I think that you'll see on the exam, this is based on people that I've talked to, is that you should be familiar with some of the inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs that are shown in the PMBOK. You should be able to recognize a difference between an input and a tool or technique. That's important. And the overview charts in each of the chapters of the PMBOK, and those of you that have a PMBOK nearby and might be able to look at it, if you look at page 65, you will see the overview chart for project integration management, and you'll see there are inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. Very simple tip here. Inputs and outputs are basically things. They're deliverables, they're tangible items, and a tool or technique is generally some activity that you will perform, some type of like a verb. For instance, estimating is not an input or an output. Estimating is an activity that you do, and it would fall under tools or techniques. Expert judgment is not something you can see or touch. It is something that is done. It's something that you do. So keep that in mind so that you can kind of differentiate inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. Based on the 10 knowledge areas, the 5 process groups, it's a running clock, 4-hour duration, no breaks. Okay. Of the 200 questions, 25 of them are called research questions, and you are not scored on those. So the number of scored questions is 175, and it's a pass-fail. So when you complete the exam and you turn in the exam, you press the send button, you will get a response fairly quickly as to whether or not you were successful. Okay? Remember, we have the proficient, moderately proficient, and less than proficient. And if you're less than proficient in more than one process group, I believe you will not be able to pass the exam. Okay? The PMBOK guide is not all-inclusive. It is not a textbook. It is part of your study. You do have to read it in its entirety, especially make sure you read the glossary. The glossary is actually very useful. Generally accepted project management practices, this is what most people will do most of the time. It will not necessarily be applied uniformly to all projects in all industries. It's a guide, and I have to emphasize, it is a guide. Okay? I like what it says. Project management team is always responsible for determining the appropriate tools, techniques, and practices for managing any given project. You have to manage the team of the technical experts. You have to work together. The process groups, you have initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. Okay, I just wanted to put this up here, and then I'll take some questions. Initiating is 13% of the exam. The questions, 13% of the questions on the exam will be initiating type questions. 24% will be planning questions. 30% will be executing type questions. Okay, monitoring and controlling will be 25% of the exam, and closing will be 8% of the exam. So these process groups here make up the exam. Again, go back to page 61 on the PMBOK, and you'll see how all this breaks down. Remember, there's 47 sub-processes that support the 5 major processes. Project management, the definition, application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques in project activities to meet project requirements. That is what the exam is about, the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities. That's what the exam will focus on. Okay? We have 10 knowledge areas. The stakeholder management was added in the 5th edition. And although I think most courses today do not necessarily focus on the triple constraint, it's something that you should be familiar with. You know, at least we used to measure success by the triple constraint, on time, within budget, according to scope. But now we have added in the new PMBOK, the 5th edition, the competing demands, which includes quality, risk, and resources. So you have multiple demands that you'll be balancing in order to manage your project successfully. There are 47 processes. Make sure you take a look at the information on that matrix on page 61. And also look at the overview charts in each chapter of the PMBOK. They're always in the very beginning. Like I said, the one on integration is on page 65. That gives you a pretty good picture of what integration or scope or time or cost management is. My suggestion here, again, to that person that asked the question about the regurgitation of the PMBOK, it's really not memorization. I call it familiarization. You should know what enterprise environmental factors are, what the difference is between an enterprise environmental factor and an organizational process asset, that you should understand what work performance information is, what a project management information system is. Not by memorization, but by being familiar with, oh, okay, that's what it is. That's what I need it for. This is how I would use it. Very important. Okay? These are the knowledge areas, and I'm not going to go through them because we really don't have time. Time management, cost, quality, human resources, communications management, risk, procurement, and stakeholder management. Again, the role of the project manager, achieve the project objectives using management skills, using leadership skills. You're an effective communicator, that you have knowledge of project management, and you demonstrated knowledge, that you're guiding the team, you're the leader, and people are going to be looking for you for direction. You're an integrated coordinator. You should always have a positive attitude, and you are going to have to balance the project constraints, the competing demands, and that is one of the major challenges of being a project manager. You're going to need strong interpersonal skills, effective communicator at multiple levels, stakeholders at multiple levels. You have to find ways to influence the organization, to get the people and the resources you need to get things done. Again, leadership, this vision, the strategy, the direction, the motivation of the people. You're going to have to solve conflicts and reach agreements sometimes, and you're going to have to work with your team. You can't do everything yourself. You're the leader. Leaders get people to buy into the project. We find alternatives. We find ways to work together. Those are the important parts of being a project manager. I mentioned enterprise environmental factors. They are considered inputs. These are things that, like the culture of your organization, the capabilities of your existing human resources, the stakeholder risk tolerances in the political climate. These are different than organizational process assets, which are more policies, procedures, guidelines, templates. So if you look at the difference, enterprise environmental factors, industry standards, and organizational process assets, what your organization has put together to help you in the form of matrix and templates and methodologies and guidelines and things like that. Okay, I think that at this point we'll just take a few questions and we'll kind of wrap up. So, okay. Kay,
sure.
What
Frank,
questions do we have?
Probably answer about 5 different individuals' questions. If you can speak to what are your recommendations for study aids in terms of reading above and beyond the PMBOK, practice test, that type of thing?
Okay, you know, there are many resources out there for study, and I don't want to sound too biased one over another. So, actually, I'll show something, a slide that's going to come up in a minute. But one of the things that's out there that you've probably heard a lot about is the RMC approach. There's a workbook out there. It's probably one of the more popular ones. that most people use that as an alternative to using the PMBOK, and it will provide you with a guide to really study for the exam in terms of terms and process groups and things like that. There's another author, Andy Crow, has put out an excellent book. There's another book called Head First PMP. I even wrote a book myself to support Dr. Harold Kersner's textbook, Project Management, a Systems Approach to Planning, Scheduling, and Controlling. That workbook is available on Amazon. I have worked with Kay Weiss, and we have put together a series of products to assist people in preparing for the exam, including an online question process, and I'll bring that slide up shortly. So, I want to be fair. There are multiple sources out there. I think you need a pretty good textbook besides the PMBOK. I've always used Dr. Kersner's book because I found it to be very, very complete, and it has been used to generate questions for the exam, but there are multiple other exam prep books. I just want to stress that exam prep books don't really teach you project management. They provide you with tools and techniques to help you pass the exam through, drills and things like that. I'm appealing to you in a little bit here that besides just studying to pass an exam, that you take the time to really, truly understand project management and become competent at managing projects. So I'd like to call it a two-pronged approach to study. Study to learn skills and study to learn to pass the exam. And I think if you do that, you'll be fine. I've been teaching project management classes for a long time, PMP prep courses for many PMI chapters. Kay Weiss and I have partnered up on this several times. I've partnered up with a good friend of mine, Gary Herkins, who I've done training with also. So when you go out there, there are multiple places to go. Try to get testimonials. Try to find out how people perceive the training. If you're going to go to a training program that is 5 days and then pass the exam, it's mostly going to be drills and project management exams and tests and so on. I'm not saying that those are bad, but if you want to learn project management, find a good course that is going to teach you the skills and also help you to pass the exam.
Okay. Thank you for that, Frank. We have a couple of questions that I might combine into one that involve the application and eligibility. So I'll just, if you don't mind, weave them together. One is a question about the experience description. Is it okay if it's less than 300 characters? And another one of them about eligibility is asking, if we have a master's degree, does it require less than the 4,500 hours that's required with a 4-year bachelor degree? And another question about the eligibility is about, do the 4,500 hours have to fall within the 3 years, or can they be spread out over more years?
Now, let me answer that one first. The 4,500 hours can go back 8 years. Okay, what they're looking for is 3 years of verifiable project management experience. You can have a year as a project manager, and then for 1 year you didn't work as a project manager, and then you came back and you worked as a year as a project manager, and then you didn't. It's 3 years of project management experience that you look back over the last 8 years, okay? As far as the master's degree, the answer to that is no. You still need your 4,500 hours. The additional graduate type of degrees and things like that, they still want you to provide 4,500 hours of experience, okay? I think that when it comes to the master's degree, if you had taken a formal course in project management as part of that, that might be something you can apply to the 35 hours of formal project management training. But you still need the 4,500 hours of experience. And what was the other question, Kay?
The other question was about their description. In their experience description, is it okay if that description is actually less than 300 characters?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes, but I would not recommend that. I would do my best to make sure that you fill that space almost completely, okay? And also, when you are completing the experience verification forms, that you do not duplicate word for word the same information on every form. Okay, you want to make sure that you show your experience by adding different information. So I would say what they're asking for is 300 to 500 characters. To tell you the truth, you'd be surprised at how quickly you can use that up. But I'm going to strongly recommend that you use up every bit of space in there as best you can to describe your experience.
Thank you. We have a question from Juan, who took a PMP Prep exam course in the year 2000. He's wondering, can they go back that far, and can he include that then in his list of 35 hours of project management training?
Your project management education does not expire. Okay, so if you took a course 10 years ago and you have the certificate, you can prove that you took formal training in project management, that will still be valid. The only thing I would tell you is that the PMBOK has changed a few times since the year 2000, so that means that you might want to do some refreshing as to terminology and process group changes and things like that. But your education, if you took a course and you have the certificate to prove, I went to a 2-week course, 1-week course in project management, whatever it is, whatever the training, that does not expire.
Would you like more questions, Frank?
Are there more questions?
There are, if you'd like them.
Well, let's do maybe 1 or 2 more. We've been on for almost an hour and a half now, so let's do a few more. And if anybody has any questions, they can send me an email and I can address them that way.
Okay. So one question is about the recommended time it will take to prepare. And, obviously it's going to vary based on experience and how fast you read and other things like that. But can you give a general rule of thumb?
Well, I don't like to actually give that basic rule of thumb there, but I'm going to say that a person who really dedicates some good study time, you would need, if you have taken some type of a formal project management course where you really got to understand, how project management works, what the processes are, including hopefully some case studies and some hands-on activities, and combined with your experience, that I would say, kind of as a reference point, that you should plan a good 40 hours of study. I mean, that would be kind of your basic foundation. That would really, help you to take the appropriate number of practice tests and read the PMBOK and read your textbooks and apply some of these principles and things like that. So I'm going to say your base would be at least 40 hours of study before you would even think about sitting for the exam.
Thank you, Frank. I think for the sake of time that we are at our hour-and-a-half point, so I'm going to recommend that people consider going to the PMP handbook on the PMI.org website for answering many of the questions that remain in here about things like renewal of the PMP and PDUs and those types of things.
Okay. I have this information up here. Kay Weiss and I put together a whole bunch of questions that will certainly help people prepare. We put a lot of work into these questions to make them as realistic as possible, as closely related to the exam as we could, to make them challenging, but also to help you learn something about project management. So you can find information on this at successfulprojects.com. Is that correct, Kay?
Yep, successfulprojects.com, and right at the top of the page you'll be able to see access to the information.
Yeah, I would recommend that you go and take a look at the information on there. We put a lot of work into, and I think you'll be happy with this particular product. So make sure you take a look at it. I think you'll find it extremely useful. And then as far as Successful Projects India, I'm going to turn this back over to Ajay for a few minutes before we close out. Ajay had some announcements to make regarding some items that are coming up. Ajay?
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank. Before I talk about that, could you clarify the one PDU information? There will be no PDU.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me talk about the PDUs. Okay, PDUs are awarded to PMPs, people with the PMP credential, and the PDUs are awarded based on the content of a program. There was a mention of a 1 PDU for this particular session. However, this was not an educational project management session in terms of learning something about project management. It was learning about the exam and how to take the exam. So this particular presentation really is not eligible for a PDU. And if you're a person planning to take the exam, that it doesn't apply to you anyway. But I just wanted to make sure that when you are awarded a PDU, it's because you have gained some knowledge about project management and not about how to take an exam. So it's really important that we wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Okay, AJ?
Yeah, thank you so much, Frank. This is really, really helpful, and a lot of people ask me these kind of questions. I think this will be very helpful for people working towards their PMP exam. So upcoming events, opportunities from Successful Project India, and we will be doing the PMP exam prep online courses, which will be launching in India. And then starting from February 2014, we'll be doing more webinars every month, value-added webinars. The list of topics right on the screen. And we are also working towards a training workshop in 2 major cities in India. And it's sometime in second quarter of 2014. I will be sending out an announcement as we finalize the plan. And we will also planning to have a certification in project management courses, which will be coming up soon. We have a project risk game, and project management books will also be available in India for sale. And the next slide. Yeah. So we asked people to reach out to us for any kind of training opportunities you would like to have in your organization, and especially when Frank is planning to visit in this year itself, it is second quarter. And if you would like to have him speak for your company or organization, please do contact me at this successfulprojectindia@gmail.com. With that, thank you very much, everyone, for joining today's call, and looking forward to more participation from everyone. Frank?
Okay, so I'm just we're going to close out now, but if you I'm just interested in a little feedback here as we start to close out. Hopefully you found this webinar to be useful. I did provide you an awful lot of information. I know it probably went by fairly quickly, but as you're closing out, any indications about the value that you got out of the session? If you wouldn't mind just putting up a few comments, just so we can see that we were doing a good job in trying to help you out. Other than that, I'd like to thank Kay Weiss of Successful Projects for her support, and a reminder to take a look at that website and possibly look at the questions that we prepared, and to Ajay for his he actually was the person that wanted to organize this particular webinar. So visit Successful Projects India, contact Ajay, find out more about programs that are available. And if you have any questions specifically for me, my email was up there. It's saladispmp@msn.com. So again, thank you very much. And again, I hope that you found some value out of this presentation.
Thank you to you, Frank. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay. All right.